Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second episode of Leading to Succeed, a look inside Grant County Schools, the podcast. I'm excited today to have our guest with us today. It's Danielle Haley. Danielle, you are a supervisor or direct report for the Family Resource Center and Youth Service Center directors. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
Would you mind sharing with our guest or with our audience a little bit about your professional journey and how you came into that role?
Sure. Beginning in 2010, I was a substitute teacher for Grant County Schools and an instructional assistant with a substitute, both things. And then I transitioned into the FRC role at Crittenden Mount Sinai Elementary. I was at Crittenden for 7 years. And then the position at the middle school became available as a youth service center coordinator. So I went to the middle school and I was there for a year and a half before I came over here.
So you served as a Family Resource Center director at Crittenden and then a youth service center coordinator at the middle school.
Correct.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what's the difference between the two and why they have different names?
Absolutely. So a Family Resource Center coordinator, the components that are required for elementary school is different than a middle and a high school. So really the focus at elementary level is transitions, so that kindergarten, that 5th grade year is super important. Even like birth to 5 is super important. That's one of the components for elementary level. Literacy, family engagement, all those things couple into an elementary school. For middle and high, it's more centered on the students. So it's like crisis, mental health counseling, even some like college and career readiness is huge for middle and high. The transition year from middle to high and then from high to college or to your post-secondary, whatever you're going to do, right? Your job or whatever that looks like. So that's the focus, is getting students ready at the middle and high for their next steps in life.
Sure.
Whereas in elementary, it's more nurturing for that family unit as a whole.
How did FRCs and YSCs come into existence? What's some of the history of that?
So in 1990, CARA, the Kentucky Education Reform Act, created FRISCY, which is FRYSC, to be a bridge for families. So really the intention was to create someone for school communities who could bridge the barriers that families were experiencing with education. So out of CARA, FRISC is actually the only thing that still remains. So they're very proud of that. It's stayed and true. It's something that other states model after us. We are the only state in the country that has FRISC. Other states have people who do kind of the same things. They're called different things. But we have been researched many times for the data that we collect, the way that we do programs, and the way that we're structured as a state entity, because that's unique as well.
So roughly, do you have any idea about how many centers exist across the state? And is there any qualification you have to meet in order to have a center?
For sure. There are 830 centers across the state of Kentucky. You have to have a certain, you don't have to have a certain free and reduced lunch number. But if you have the free and reduced lunch number that's decently high or within like a need, and then family surveys. So those are super important. If a new school is built, you don't automatically get a FRISC. Because it's a state-funded position, you have to actually apply once you have your students in your building, you see what your demographics are going to look like, and then the state will say, we can fund you or we can't fund you, because really it's up to the state how many centers they fund.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then each center operates off a state grant. That's not something that comes out of the general fund of the local school board. So it's actually state-funded money, correct?
Exactly, yes.
Okay.
And that money fluctuates yearly. So it depends on how many students we have enrolled and how high our free and reduced rate is each year. So even though we might get a grant that's a 2-year grant cycle and have a certain amount of money the first grant cycle, the state can say, you had a drop in enrollment, your free and reduced number changed, so you had $80,000 the first year, the second year you might have 60. And so you have written a program plan that you're going to implement. That's a 2-year program plan, but now you automatically have $20,000 less. Or maybe it could increase, and now you have more money. It just depends on school, just your school dynamics and how much your attendance is important.
So I remember as a principal, my attendance clerk always really keeping a keen eye on getting that free and reduced lunch paperwork turned in. I would imagine, is that why that we are so intentional in making sure that at registration there's a touch point to ensure that we capture the real data of where we are as a district, because it does impact the funding for our centers.
It directly impacts, 100% sure. A couple years ago, we wasn't really, trying to get those forms back, and we took a hit in our funding. So the next year we were like, man, we really have to make sure we get those forms in. So it's super important that all of our families fill those out.
Good to know. So I want to focus a little bit for a minute about the FRC side of things. You talked about the support for families, and I was really intrigued by what you said regarding birth to 5. That's before, in many instances, we even had much contact. Talk to me about how those directors are intentional about reaching those families and what supports they might provide.
It's really hard without having a birthing hospital in our community, an OB that we can go to and say, how many birthing families do you have right now? So finding those birth to 5 families is hard. We collaborate a lot with the public library because they do reading groups. They do their toddler time and their little tot time where we can go there and say, hey, you're a Grant County family, what support's going on for you? Also, we have the Council for a Brighter Future, which is a great collaboration across Grant County and Owen County, and it's also a state-funded grant. But the focus is to collaborate with preschools and daycares within our community to ensure that they are providing families with the supports that they need and the extra funding that they would need to help families produce ready for kindergarten kiddos, right? But we also have the Dolly Parton Imagination Library. And that's a great way for us to say there are 1,000 kids right now signed up for Dolly Parton in Grant County.
Wow.
So, that's a great number to know that there's 1,000 birth to 5-year-olds here. Now, where they're living, we don't know. And how do we connect them? We don't know, because we're not allowed to use the list that Dolly Parton gives us to be able to contact them. But we know that those exist. So we try to have events once or twice a year, mostly at the Grant County Park or at the library or community places. We set up tables and we try to work through our daycares to connect families. We have a lot of families who stay home with their children. So finding those families is difficult and something that's hard.
You mentioned the Dolly Parton Library. What is that exactly, and what do our families need to know about that?
Yeah, so the Dolly Parton Imagination Library is a monthly book that children receive every month once they're signed up. You can sign up once you're born. So if you were born in January, it takes about 3 months for you to start receiving a book. So a baby born in January would start receiving a book typically in March. And then from March until their 5th birthday, they receive a book every single month. So, you're creating a library. If you have multiple children, that's okay, because the books change. They're age specific. So if you have a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old in your home, the 3-year-old and 2-year-old are receiving different books. And it changes every time. Personally, I have 3 children, and each of them receive the books. And we don't have the same book in our home. So we have our library is probably 50 books deep at this point. So it's just a great way for families to build the library so that they're reading. And we want families to read to children. Read to your kids. Make sure they're understanding. Talk to them about the book. Look at the pictures. Let them tell the story. It's great. It's important.
I recently saw a news program, and they had former superintendent of Boone County Schools, Randy Poe, as a panelist on this program. And he mentioned just the significant increase of a student's readiness for school is based on how many words they're exposed to as a child. And I know that a lot of times we assume that kids are absorbing words from media, so it could be from a game system or a tablet or a cartoon, and I do think there's some value in that. But what Dr. Poe was really pointing out is that there's a significant increase in performance for kids who are exposed to written text, printed text. And so it sounds like to me the Dolly Parton Imagination Library fills that gap, perhaps for families. And I think I remember correctly, at a former district, we really dug deep into adverse childhood experiences, sometimes referred to as ACEs. And I remember being surprised that one of those indicators was, were you exposed to books, and did you have access to age-appropriate books when you're growing up as a child? So maybe we need to do a better job of communicating with families the importance of those libraries and the importance of exposure to books. And I appreciate what you said too. It doesn't have to be anything formal. It's just a matter of sitting down and allowing the young one to crawl up next to you and reading and discussing and talking about the story together, and the pictures, as you say. Literacy involves all of those things. It's not just the printed words. It's the communication of the idea and the concepts that those words and pictures represent. I think is just a simple shift that would help our students so much be more successful as they enter school. And I think, it's important to take a moment to realize that students begin a perception of self based on those early experiences at school. And so we do everything we can. I know that our teams work very hard to address any needs, and we take all kids wherever they are.
Absolutely.
But one thing that families can do, if maybe they haven't fully considered, is just dedicate 15 to 30 minutes daily to reading with young children, and that'll have a huge positive impact on their future. So appreciate you talking about that.
Absolutely.
Let's transition. You talked about readiness. What is readiness, and how do the YSCs, Youth Service Center coordinators, how do those directors assist in making sure that readiness is at front of mind for those students?
Well, I think readiness is unique to each student. So where I was as a high school senior is completely different to where our kiddos are today. So understanding what their needs are, where they're at socially, emotionally, educationally, whether they're ready to go on into the college or to post-secondary, whatever that looks like. It's absolutely individual. So creating those relationships is so important. And a youth service center coordinator knows their kids, and they know where they're at, and they know how to help that kiddo get to where the kiddo wants to be. I think that as a youth service center coordinator, you have conversations with students about everything. And so readiness becomes where my goals are and where my goals lie in my future, but also like what are the tangible steps of getting there? And then as a youth service center coordinator, you're along with them. And it's a great ride to be able to say, yes, you've reached this milestone, what's next? Let's go. So connecting students with supports if they need additional supports and additional resources, because sometimes our schools don't have everything that we need. So we need to make sure we have those collaborations together. But readiness is just getting a kiddo ready for where they're going next.
That's exciting stuff. As high school principal, I really enjoyed that process. And I have found over the course of my career that students don't lack talent, they don't lack ability, they don't lack knowledge. Oftentimes they lack a framework. And I think that even well into adulthood, that sometimes people resist their dreams because they simply don't know the first step. And so based on what you just shared, I see a wonderful opportunity for YSC directors to help kids take that first step. And I believe wholeheartedly that if we can repeat that multiple times over the course of their secondary life, they're going to be so much more bold and so much more willing to take those initial steps, even if if plans change and circumstances change and life happens. I think it's so critical to have that framework to, as you say, set a goal and know the appropriate steps of how to reach that goal. And I love the fact that our directors are involved in that work, as you say, knowing every child, every student, and supporting them in that journey.
Yes.
I can't think of a more fulfilling job than to be that student's kind of guide into the future. And so that's really big and exciting work.
It is. It's the greatest job. It really is.
You've talked a lot about things that I think perhaps maybe just the typical person doesn't consider what FRCs and YSCs are designed for. I know as a former principal at both elementary school and high school, a lot of times there was this perception that that's where extra clothes were stored, or if a student maybe was hungry, that's where they could go to get a snack. But it sounds like to me that the role is much broader than that. You want to talk a little bit about that at all?
Yeah, sure. So part of being a youth service center or a family resource center coordinator is removing those non-academic barriers. And we all know that that is basic needs. If you don't have clean clothes, how are you going to sit in a classroom and learn all day, right? So that's super important. Hygiene is important. Health, there's actually a health component for both family resource centers and youth service center coordinators where they're addressing those things and basic needs. But it's so much more than that too. It's the family literacy. It's connecting families to supports that they need. It's students and their career readiness and their mental health and where they're at. So yes, basic needs is a small portion, but really the goal is to make sure every kiddo is ready to succeed. And even kiddos who don't need new clothes or food, right? So even the kiddo who's on an A-track line to Ivy League school might still need the support of a family resource center coordinator through a mental health service or like a crisis mitigation, or even just someone to talk to and be a resource because they're in a club that you are sponsor of. So I just think that, yeah, the role itself is much broader than people give it credit for.
So you touched on something that I want to kind of visit a little bit. Also, the perception is that those directors are there to serve maybe that free and reduced population, but it sounds like to me they can be of service to any student at any time in their journey and having needs met. I think it's probably naive of us to think that any of us have all of our needs met all the time.
Right.
And so one thing I used to tell the high schoolers at the beginning of the year was that every adult in that building was there to serve them and that they were the work and we're there to give them the best possible future. And I certainly see that role feeds into that.
Oh, absolutely.
It also sounds like that there would need to be some coordination with the principal and counselors. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So a frisk can't live in a silo, right? Because students who are seeing the school counselor for grades or even counseling services are probably also seeing their frisk. So making sure that kiddo gets back into class and that kiddo isn't missing too much class, meeting with all the different people to try to get the supports they need is important. So having that open communication and collaboration with your school counselor, and then also your principal. They have to know what's happening in your center. They have to be able to support you because they want to support you. They want all kiddos to have success and have access to things that you're providing. If they don't know about it, and how can they help you or help families understand what's happening in their school even? So it's super important that the frisk is collaborating with teachers, they're collaborating with the counselor, the principal, really just everyone in the building. It's important.
Now, you mentioned a plan earlier. So this work isn't just reactionary, is it?
No.
When are plans developed and how are they developed and what's that process look like?
Yeah, so it's kind of like a grant. So we say the Frisk grant, but it's really a program plan. So every 2 years we have to apply back to Frisk and say, this is our free and reduced number. Here's our family surveys. We still need to have Frisk in our school, right? Because at any time they could take it away if we're not producing the information that they want us to. There's several ways that the state monitors Frisk. Through Infinite Campus, they check and make sure all of our data is updated correctly and consistently because they track that. Well, if your center's not busy and you're not having anything in IC, then why do you have a center at your school, right? So it's super important that Frisk are monitoring their data. But also also the program plan takes into account those parent surveys, also a staff survey, and then you write components for each of the 5 components that you have for Frisk. So if it's a health component, your program, your data would ask questions about health, right? And so then you would say, okay, 80% of my staff say that sleep is an issue for my students. How can I, as a Frisk coordinator, help mitigate that for my kiddos? So I would maybe write something into my program plan to say, by 2028, Grant County High School will implement 6 programs for sleep help for kiddos. And whether that be small group or whether that be bringing somebody in from the outside, whether that's a social media blast, it can look as many different ways, but you're being very specific about what you're naming that you're going to do in that program plan.
So I recently with you, checked in with each of our coordinators and principals
Mm-hmm.
to review their proposal for their plans for the next couple of years. And what I was so impressed with is that I feel like our coordinators do a really good job of working together as a team on behalf of the district.
Mm.
And so I know that you meet with them regularly and you discuss trends and data and topics that are unique to the district. But I also appreciated how every center was unique to that school. So the plan really does reflect the data that was gathered through those surveys and the interactions and knowing that community, so that, a CMZ plan may look different than an MCE plan, simply for the fact that the needs are different based on those communities in which they serve.
Absolutely.
So I appreciate all of our directors taking that time. I know that's a tedious process, and there's lots of data recording and lots of background work that nobody sees.
Right.
And so typically what people see is the fruit of all that labor, but they don't see all the hard work that goes into it behind the scenes. So a shout out to all of our coordinators and directors for doing a great job with that.
Absolutely.
Well, I want to kind of wrap things up by talking about these non-academic barriers.
Yeah.
And so I think what was unique about Kara and the idea for these coordinators and the centers is that there was a lot of wisdom in recognizing that sometimes it's not a cognitive or an academic barrier that causes a student to struggle in school.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate the wisdom of those legislators in identifying that somebody had to be boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It had to be school specific,
Mm-hmm.
and it had to evolve, and it couldn't be static over time. Anything you want to say about non-academic barriers?
Absolutely. So our kiddos come to us from so many different places. Even within Grant County, I think about 6 centers throughout our community. And like you said, MCE to Crittenden, and all in between. The high school alone is the breadbasket of our whole community, I feel like. And the things that our kiddos experience and the things that maybe kiddos in the north have experienced and the things in the south haven't experienced. It's just so broad that, I think about grief. I think about kiddos who just need extra support with their homework. I think about kiddos who are struggling just with behaviors and need some extra support and communication and to be able to talk to somebody. I think about kiddos who might be in the foster care system and are coming in just disheveled or, having a tough time, just need someone that they can see and talk to. And I think that Frisk is there and able to do all those things. I think non-academic barriers is such a broad, you can't really encompass everything when you say that. It is everything. It's just everything.
Yeah, even in that list of things that you identified, I remember we had a significant amount of students move in from out of district. And so, and not having any context, our schools maybe feel a little bit different if they moved to us from Cincinnati suburb.
Right.
And so acclimating to where they are and how school works and what they need to know and how to function and operate, I see a tremendous opportunity that our directors fill that gap quite consistently.
They do, absolutely.
What do families need to know?
Oh, our families need to know that Frisk are there for you. So even at the high school level, where it's more centered on the student, families should be involved, and they should know what their kiddo's experiencing, what their kiddo's going through. They're there to support families through that readiness process and that transition process on. Families need to know that Frisk are available to talk to and to provide resources for whatever your family's going through, whether it be divorce or it just be, you lost a job. They're there to help you as well, and they have the resources to connect you with the people that can help. So Frisk are there not just for our kiddos, but for our families too.
Well, that's great stuff. I know that if perhaps you have questions or you would like to reach out to a school director, you simply just call the front office and say that you need help in getting in touch with the FRC or a youth service center coordinator for that school, and they'll be more than happy to help you. Well, Danielle, I appreciate your time today. I appreciate learning about the history and the background and the role of our directors across the district. We want to thank them for their tireless efforts. I know they're on the clock almost 24/7 because crisis doesn't respect time. And so when we have needs, we are quick to reach out to them, and we will continue to do so. But please know that you're very much appreciated, and thank you for sharing with us today. And until next time, we look forward to seeing you again on Leading to Succeed, the Grant County Schools podcast. Thank you.